Welcome to Musings on Mysteries and the Mythical Matrix. Ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers, musers, conspiracy theorists, interdimensional philosophers, seekers of truth, and last, but certainly not least, all of you that desperately cling to your confirmation bias. Whether your interest is Atlantis, Zeus, or anything in between, we tackle it all from our quantumly entangled castle tucked away in the ancient flood-battered Central Pangaean mountain range. We're a podcast dedicated to exploring the ancient, mysterious, and unknown with logic and reason, and where we also theorize the fourth dimension exists and is the spiritual. Only trigger warning for this episode is a logical conversation, so if applying the Socratic method on fringe topics is disturbing to you, turn off the podcast now.
I'm triggered.
Okay, well, I guess I'll just do this podcast episode by myself then. All right, so you have a fact for us, psychology fact?
This is Maddie, by the way, in case nobody knows.
I mean, you were the only female we've had on the show at this point. So.
I feel honored.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I think it's pretty easy to delineate for our listeners, I imagine.
So the fact that I have today is the halo effect. So when we have a positive impression of someone in one area, we view them positively in other areas as well.
Yeah, so basically if you see someone that's good at something or you see someone that's like physically attractive, you tend to think that they're better at other things pretty much.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Like we don't view them as having as much flaws if we see them doing good in one thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I also have a fact that was very interesting that I uncovered. It was that fingerprints, it's actually not scientifically that two fingerprints are not alike. It's just statistically that two fingerprints are not alike. Fingerprints can actually be very similar or even identical scientifically. It's just statistically so improbable that statisticians have ruled it out.
I have not heard of that before.
Yeah, I know.
Well, and you got to think about, they look at certain characteristics of your fingerprints, whether you have, like a swirl or I forget what all they're called. But, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no.
That it would be like statistically instead of factually, scientifically.
I always just assumed it was scientifically and factually, but then it's like, oh, it's just statistically. Like scientifically, it could happen. It's just statistically, it's ruled as such an improbability. So I've probably had the same fingerprint as someone else in ancient history that we just don't know about.
That would be so interesting because, like, what if somebody back then committed a crime? And then it's like, you have the same fingerprints.
This is why time traveling is a bad idea, especially to our interdimensional philosophers out there.
There's so many ideas. There's so many reasons why it's a bad idea.
All right.
Continue.
So, welcome back, Mystery Seekers, Musers. We are, well, first and foremost, Happy New Year, because it's still 2024 right now as we're recording this, but when this is released, it'll be 2025, and purely coincidentally, we're going to bring in the new year as the ancient Babylonians would have rung in their new year, even though I'm pretty sure it falls on a different date, by discussing the Enuma Elish, the 7 tablets of creation.
Is it Elish or Eilish? I've heard it both ways.
I think it's Enuma Elish. I don't know. I mean, it comes from Akkadian. So, I mean, yeah.
But anyways, Happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy New Year to everyone, even though it's not New Year for us technically yet, because we are quantumly transcending time. But yeah, so we're going to be discussing the Enuma Elish, however you want to say it. I'll probably say it both ways because it's
like say just, Billie Eilish.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, so it's written on seven different tablets. It's it's one of the more important Mesopotamian texts. It establishes Marduk as the chief deity of Babylon, and Babylonians kind of use this as their way to establish their supremacy over everybody else, kind of, in a sense. So, way we're going to flow this episode here is, once again, we'll start off with historical context. Ideally, be done with that within the first 15 minutes here. So, if you don't want to hear all the historical background and disclaimers and all of that, I would maybe skip to like 10, 12 minute range or so. From there, we're going to actually tell the detailed story itself of the Enuma Elish, depending on, that'll probably only take 15, 20, 25 minutes. I'm guesstimating here, so you might be seeing like this is a 2-hour episode, and you're like, where the heck did they go with that?
Well, it depends how many times I interrupt you with something, so well, no. I will... We
got to have a good discussion and conversation, and I am not going to cap that. We might split this into 2 episodes, though, if it goes into that, but we'll see.
Okay.
And then we're going to do our comparative mythology analysis, of course. So we're going to go and look at what what we've already talked about in past episodes. So we're going to do comparative analysis with the Enuma Elish and Genesis, which is a very timely discussion with the recent Billy Carson debate. Yes, I can go episodes without mentioning Billy Carson. I was listening back and I'm like, I've mentioned Billy Carson every single episode for like the last 5 episodes.
We talked about that and I was like, yeah, you could probably go without talking about him, but it relates to him.
So. No, I don't just have a vendetta against Billy Carson for our listeners. Number one, he's a very relevant topic right now as we're recording because he just had his debate that he royally lost with Wesley Huff. And then
now he's trying to sue him.
Yeah, because he lost. And he's saying, oh, you're taking my likeness and using it. And it's like, yeah, well, you agreed to do a podcast episode with the guy. So
the other I guess excuse was, I just got out of the hospital. Okay, then why'd you agree to do it?
Yeah, but he used that as an excuse, and then
if you don't feel good enough, like don't agree to do it.
He got his facts wrong elsewhere too. He misquoted and miscited like elsewhere in all of his other content outside of like being in the hospital or not.
No, I know. I just was saying that was an excuse that was said either by him or his wife.
Yeah,
that also tried defending him.
Right. Which I mean, obviously, if you get out of the hospital, it's a very serious thing. Okay, big deal. But you also shouldn't use that as an excuse for like functioning poorly. Wesley's offered to run the debate back. So if that's the reason, go run the debate back then, on your A game. For me though, like you've heard me rant about Atlantis. Atlantis is a huge passion subject of mine. If I just got out of the hospital and like lost a bunch of blood, I wouldn't be misquoting stuff on Atlantis if it was an area I proclaimed to be a subject matter expert in.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have some empathy there if he got out of the hospital, but also like it just kind of sounds like.
But again, he agreed to do it, and now he's using that as an excuse. So
so run it back.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, that went way more into Billy Carson than I meant to. I was just supposed to be like a 20-second,
a brief mention,
20-second thing.
I will let you do your thing, babe. Go ahead.
The other reason I do mention Billy Carson is because we are going through Sumerian mythology and Mesopotamian mythology, and that this is like a crutch of Billy Carson's for everything that he talks about, and he royally misrepresents things. And so, even though 5 years from now Billy Carson might be completely obsolete, I kind of feel it's my obligation to go through all of this and address some of the false information that Billy Carson is putting forward from these texts. So that being said, let's roll into historical. Well, I guess first off, legal schmeagle stuff. I'm going to be relying once again on Myths of Mesopotamia, the Oxford World Classic by Stephanie Daly. I will put a source in the show notes. That's not where I'm primarily getting the whole summary from. I'm getting it from a collection of sources on the Enuma Elish, but I am going to read a couple brief excerpts from this on Nibiru. It's going to be relevant for discussion in the second half of this episode, or maybe the next episode if this gets split into 2. But just so the listeners are aware, that's like kind of my disclaimer. It's fair use to bring this up and to read a small citation, especially with I'm going to add some transformative content to it. So let's set the historic stage here. Once again, the Enuma Elish was found in the Library of Nineveh. I believe this was the same library as Epic of Gilgamesh. I could be mistaken on that, though. I'm speculating on air, which is bad. I'm going to get accused of misrepresenting stuff. That's a guess. I'm assuming. It's around the Enuma Elish is from around the 12th century BCE, but it's likely from older traditions. I think Babylon is actually a lot older than a lot of people realize. Like the city itself dates back to around the same time as like Sumerians and the Akkadians and all of that. From loose research, it looked like it was like 2300 BCE for Babylon, or maybe a little bit sooner, maybe 2120. So that's just something to bear in mind, is that they probably had this tradition for a very long time. but the most recent copy we have is from the 12th century. Written in Akkadian cuneiform script once again. So yeah, as I stated, cultural significance. The Enuma Elish was recited during the Babylonian New Year festival. Akitu, if you want to look up when Akitu is, to fact check.
How do you spell that?
Right there, Akitu.
Okay.
Because I'm just curious. It probably doesn't fall on our New Year, but I am curious since we are doing this on January 1st. That'd be really funny.
Like when it is?
Yeah, it probably wouldn't align with ours because it's
No.
Yeah, it's the lunar. I think they use lunar cycles primarily because that's what Marduk establishes in his creation.
I mean, the first thing that came up was April 1st.
Yeah. Okay.
Wildly off.
But like that's what makes more sense for a new year though, because it's when the winter season is ending. Like why do we have our new year smack dab in the middle of like winter? Anyway, that's a whole different.
I could get into that, but we're not going to.
I'm going to tangent here. I'm sorry. This was supposed to be a historical section. I'm turning it into rant section. I think we should move Christmas until like the end of the winter season because like the anticipation of Christmas is better than Christmas itself most times.
Oh yeah,
we've talked
you've
about
told
this.
me about this where you want it to be like the very end.
Yeah, that helps get you through the whole
year.
Winter season, and that way you have the whole winter season to enjoy and think about Christmas, and then you have Christmas as the winter season comes to a close.
But you also thought that like all of the holidays were very mushed together, like Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and that's another
Christmas,
reason.
Like
so
New
that
Year's,
way,
they're all mushed together.
Like Thanksgiving makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because like that's because the Canadians have a different Thanksgiving than the Americans do, but their Thanksgivings align with when the crop yields are approximately winding down. So it's a celebration of the last big crop yield before we roll into the winter season. So Thanksgiving makes sense. Halloween, I mean, it's not officially kind of seen as like...
It's not a federal...
Yeah.
Is it?
I don't think so, because you don't get off for it. But then like spacing Christmas out a little bit, it would give you more time to... Anyway, I'm going to stop this here because I have a lot of opinions on this. Coming out of the Christmas season, the Christmas episode we did last episode. Anyway, it's timely. Sorry for our listeners that are listening to this in like July. You're getting a Christmas in July rant here.
It fits.
But yeah, so political significance, this solidified in the Babylonians' minds that they were the dominant people group of Mesopotamia because their city was specifically established by Marduk, the chief deity in the Enuma Elish.
So they thought that they were just better than other people.
They kind of use this to affirm their worldviews, pretty much.
Okay.
You see a lot of similar themes connected to the broader mythology around like surrounding regions. You see overlapping deities used by a lot of the Mesopotamians, and we'll see this as we progress into like the Epic of Atrahasis, which is one we're going to do soon. We're going to do the Eridu Genesis. These are all Mesopotamian myths because you're giving me really...
You're just really naming off like all these names, and it's like I have not heard of these at all.
Yeah.
Most of these episodes, I don't go in blind, but... It's a lot less knowledge than what you have that I come in with.
Yeah, and that's okay. You kind of bring in kind of more of a fresh set of eyes because I've been doing all this research to prep for these episodes.
These episodes are like you teaching me something, which is fun. But yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty much all I got for historical context. I will also add that these episodes are turning into pretty hefty preps. So I may... have to switch to doing every other week for podcast release starting after this New Year episode. I'm not sure. So if you as the listener are seeing we haven't released an episode the week after this one, it's just, hey, I needed more time to prep because I'd rather take a week off than rush content and deliver something half-baked to you as a listener and get it wrong. Because, I'm trying to present the facts and the information as accurately as I can and as much as I can understand them. So I'll just throw that out there. And we are about smack dab at 15 minutes. So I guesstimated that like perfectly.
Even with your Billy Carson rant and your Christmas rant.
I just actually planned those rants so we could get to 15 minutes. So
sneaky.
I do what I can. Well, we will take a brief pause here so we can segue from the historical context and background of the Enuma Elish, and then we will jump right in after this short break to summarizing the story and telling it to you as the listener. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. we have returned. I don't know. I said we were going to bring us back, and then Maddie started saying something, so you might have heard a little blip there if I couldn't edit it out. I might have edited it out. I don't
Oops.
know.
It's nothing bad. Nothing bad.
No mistakes. Yeah, I don't have to censor you out this time like
All
I
good
did
things.
in like the Epic of Gilgamesh episode.
You had to censor me?
Yeah, because instead of Sheol, you said HE double hockey sticks.
Well,
Yeah.
It's not cursing if it's a place.
I already censored it. It's too late. I'm not going back.
No, I know.
Hopefully no one rings the doorbell this time
Oh my gosh, yeah. Who rings a doorbell?
at like 8:30 p.m. Mailman of all people too. Like, come on.
I was going to be so mad if he woke up our daughter.
Yeah. Yep. All right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Nope, you're good. So we'll roll into the story here. I will say this does get a bit dense with names, and with the original readings when I was like going through this and prepping, it took me probably 2 or 3 like reviews of the material to even just begin to start wrapping my mind around what all was happening. So this will likely be a little heavy for our listeners, and that's okay. What I did is I have actually already released on the channel. There is an Enuma Elish episode that is, I think it's like retold in like
8 minutes.
8 minutes. Thank you. It's on our channel. It's a video, so you can go to Musings on Mysteries and Mythical Matrix on YouTube. And I did like AI visuals and narration and music to, give you a good feel of what's going on and an introduction to the deities. So if you're I need to put a face to the name kind of person, like I tend to be, that's going to be a great resource for you. I also did a Discovering the Real Nibiru breakdown. I think that one's just under 9 minutes. You can go watch that one as well on the YouTube channel, and that'll break down stuff about Nibiru. Just so you as the listener, if you're jumping on in all of this blind, be warned, I'll try to make this connect as best I can, but it is pretty dense on all the different deities. I've slimmed it down a little bit. But yeah, that's just a resource you can feel free to use. Check out the video. Please give it a like too. That definitely helps it get out to more viewers. So that being said, we'll start off with Tablet 1. In the beginning, you really only have 2 deities here. You have Apsu, who's the deity of fresh water, and you have Tiamat, that's the deity of salt water. And they mingle together and they start creating the first gods. And I think you have a whole bunch. You have Anu, you have Lamu and Lahamu, you have Anshar and Kishar. I hit most of these in the video. And then you have... and then
just a bunch of different gods.
Yeah, you have a whole bunch get rattled off, and then it gets more confusing because then you'll have 2nd and 3rd generation of gods as well. So, what happens is the younger gods that get created, they become noisy and disruptive. They disturb Apsu's peace, and he gets upset, and he talks to Tiamat and his vizier Mumu. I think it's Mumu. Yeah. And he decides that he wants to try to wipe out all the gods. He's like the cranky old man, if you will. He's like, man, I just want to, have my sleep, get off my lawn, kids, kind of approach. That's his.
Are you thinking like grumpy grandpa from like Monster House type thing?
I haven't seen Monster House,
but. Get off my
but
lawn.
Yeah, like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, he's really mad. He formulates this plot. And then I'm going to introduce Ea here. So Ea is a huge name for Mesopotamian mythology. He's also known as Enki. So Ea and Enki, same deity. I believe, I'll have to fact check this one here, but I believe Ea is the child of Anu. So Ea is a 2nd generation god. That's fact. Anu is 1st generation god created by Tiamat and Apsu. So Ea is the god of wisdom and magic, and he discovers that Apsu is planning to kill all the other gods, the 1st and 2nd generation of gods. And he goes in and... Sorry, Maddie's showing me something. Just go ahead and say what it is.
Sorry, you said you needed to fact check, so I just Googled it really quick. But Ea is considered a child of Anu.
Yes.
So,
okay, so I was right. Good.
Yes.
Okay, but yeah. So Ea lulls Apsu into a slumber, and then Ea kills Apsu in a act of betrayal to preempt the strike that Apsu is going to do. So Tiamat gets angry and she's grieving Apsu's death, and then eventually some of the younger gods on her side prod her a bit, and they're like, "Hey, Apsu, your love has been killed. What are you going to do about it?" And so Tiamat kind of goes from this nurturing goddess to this rage deity. And she starts to create a army of monstrous beings. She appoints Kingu, who is another deity, as their leader. She gives him the Tablets of Destinies, which I'm not quite sure what those are, but it's supposed to be something that holds incredible power over the cosmos and like reality. So I kind of think like maybe like a version of the Infinity Stones from the Avengers, for to put it in layman's terms here. So he's
anyone has seen that.
Yeah. Well, most people have.
Maybe they're more DC fans.
That's fair. So the Tablets of Destinies give him supreme authority, basically. And so the younger gods get terrified of Tiamat and her army. So they gather all together and they try to figure out what to do. And so they send out a number of different gods to try to face Tiamat. And so Anu gets sent first. He's the sky god, and he's the first generation of gods. And he attempts to confront Tiamat, and he runs away, overwhelmed by fear. And then while all this is going on here, the council is saying, "Oh, but you know, we have these strong men and these strong warriors. They should be able to take out these women, this woman, because men are more powerful than a woman is." And and then like all the men are like running, like scared. All the men deities.
Mm-hmm.
So Anu goes first. He can't do it. He runs away. Ea goes out to try to do it, and even though he defeated Apsu, he's too nervous to face Tiamat directly. So he kind of hightails it as well.
She has all the feminine rage.
Yeah. And then everyone's very nervous because it's like, okay, well, Ea is the one that got rid of Apsu. So, who's going to face Tiamat now? And so Marduk, who's Ea's son, so Marduk is a third generation of gods. So Anu is like the grandfather, and then Ea or Enki is the father, and then Marduk is the son. And Marduk steps forward and he says that he's willing to face Tiamat. And that's basically tablets 1 and 2 in a nutshell. Did you have anything you wanted to interject that is immediately relevant? Because I do want to try to save most questions for the end.
The Tablets of Destiny.
Oh, yeah, please go ahead. What do you got on that?
All it says is that it's a powerful artifact that contains the decrees of the gods and gives the owner supreme power over the universe. So
yeah, so
that's basically all it says to me.
Basically the first version of the Infinity Gauntlet kind of thing. In a sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a way to simplify it.
Like just divine power.
So that's tablets 1 and 2 right there. So then we roll into tablets 3 and 4. So the rise of Marduk. Marduk is chosen. He agrees to fight Tiamat, and the council agrees to send him. But he has one condition, that if he wins, the gods will give him supreme authority. He rules all of them. He's the boss.
So he rules all the gods.
Yes, if he wins, that's the deal.
Does that mean that he has the Tablets of Destiny then?
Not yet.
Because that's
not
the
yet.
universe.
Not yet. No.
Okay.
So, because that's still in Kingu's hands.
No, I mean like if he wins.
Yeah, that he receives that and everything else. He receives complete rule over all the other gods, which we'll explain a bit more when we get to Tablet 7. But the gods, they talk about it, they debate, and they're like, we really don't have a choice. So they agree to his terms. Like, okay, yeah, if you beat her, we submit to your authority. You are the supreme deity.
Mm-hmm.
So Marduk goes and prepares for battle. He crafts divine weapons. He builds a net for himself, and he builds a bow with arrows to take down Tiamat. So then he gathers all of his weapons together, and he goes out to face her, and he uses his net to capture Tiamat, and he's a storm god, so he has control over like the winds, and he uses the winds to force her mouth open and shoots an arrow into her heart, killing her. So he kills.
You did not put a trigger warning for killing, but I'm assuming that doesn't matter.
That's fine. Yeah,
okay.
It's people die.
I apologize. People die.
Gods die. It happens.
It's a fact of life.
I mean, I think
I loved how nonchalant you were about people die. Please continue.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. So Tiamat then is split into two. One half becomes the heavens, and the other half becomes the earth. And then it gets pretty explicit in tablets 4, and I believe some in tablet 5 as well, where Marduk actually goes through and like crafts different things from different organs of her body. Like it even specifies like crafting things from her liver. Now this is, a goddess of water we're talking about. We're not talking about like gory stuff, but like the different components of her he uses to create the cosmos. So
that's an interesting concept.
Yeah. And so then the Anunnaki, who are this council, proclaim Marduk as their supreme ruler, and they submit authority to him. And
so basically now he rules everything.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Do you have anything to interject so far?
No, I was going to say something, but I am going to save it for the comparative part.
Okay. Yeah, make sure you take notes, because I do want to dive into the comparative mythology pretty in depth here. But yeah, we're going to save that for the end.
Yep,
so,
got it.
Yeah, so Marduk brings order to the cosmos further. After constructing things from Tiamat's remains, he fixes the stars in the heavens. He assigns 3 stars to be for each month. So for a total of 36 stars there. He creates the moon to, kind of like have control. It's referred to as like jewel of the sky or something like that, I think, in Stephanie Dolly's translation. But he sets up the moon, and that helps kind of construct their calendar, because I believe the Babylonians primarily are relying here on like a lunar calendar to indicate, and using like the 29.5 days of the moon cycle to mark their months, and then 12 of those marks a whole year.
I was going to say, I really like the symbolism, though, of that, because it's like you're taking your fallen enemy and creating something that the people that you will rule over have to live in. So they're constantly reminded by your victory. I think that's pretty cool symbolism.
Yeah. So they, I'm trying to see what else here. So then he starts assigning different roles to all the other gods as well in Tablet 5. So he'll go, I'm not going to list all of them, because again, it would just be way too much for our listeners to be able to digest, especially just hearing it. But he'll go through and he'll assign, different deities to have control different aspects of the creation. So basically, he's taking the parts of Tiamat and everything that he's crafted from Tiamat, and then he's saying, okay, you, this deity, are going to have control over this aspect right here, over the horizons. You, this deity, Sin, you're going to have control over the moon. And he breaks down all these different components to his creation and divvies out control of it. So that's pretty much Tablet 5 right there. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back for Tablets 6 and 7. I think we'll be able to do this all in one episode. It's looking like hit Nibiru and then comparative mythology.
Yeah,
so,
I'm really trying to refrain.
No, you're good. I'm really looking forward to what questions and stuff you have to add in. I just want to get through the whole narrative first, and then dive into all that stuff after we hit the meat of everything.
I got you.
So we will be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Please stay tuned. And we have returned, ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers, musers, from surfing through the remains of Tiamat, quantumly transcending time, to bring you the rest of the Enuma Elish. So we're on tablet 6 here. So what starts to happen is that the Anunnaki, who are assigned to rule and do work on this newly created cosmos, get tired of their labor, and they ask Marduk, hey, can you do something about this? And so Marduk issues a decree that they're going to use the blood of Kingu, Tiamat's consort, advisor, Tiamat's champion, and they are going to use that blood intermingled with clay to make mankind. So Marduk actually issues a decree, and I think Ea is the one that goes out and actually does it with his magic. So then that's how humanity is created. And it's interesting because it kind of implies too that humanity has a little bit of chaos within them, being created out of Kingu, who is in control of, Tiamat's army, basically. What do you think about that?
I mean, I agree, but there's also, you can't have complete order without some chaos, because then order would lose its meaning if there's no chaos. You wouldn't know the opposite of that thing if you didn't have both. Like good and evil.
That's a big philosophical that's a big
that too much?
philosophical tangent. I would actually disagree.
Philosophical.
I would actually disagree with that.
Would you?
Yeah, I think that you don't have to have the opposite of something for something to exist.
Oh.
So, but I mean, that's a whole philosophical debate, and it really depends on what specifically you're applying it to, which
like
that's good. I like it.
I think it does depend on what you apply it to, but for certain things, like if you don't have the opposite thing, the original loses its meaning. You don't have a definition for it without.
I don't think that good loses its meaning without evil, though. But
I don't know.
Maybe maybe some of our listeners would disagree because that's highly worldview dependent question and subject there.
I also feel like I'm more pessimistic than you, but so maybe that's it too.
Fair enough. But yeah, so mankind is created to serve the gods and to work for them. And then we roll into Tablet 7 here. And Tablet 7 is interesting because it goes through and it lists all the different gods, and it proclaims them. It proclaims 50 different deity names as Marduk, but they're not actually Marduk. They're the other specific deities. So the intent of this here is to establish Marduk as the central deity of Babylon and is supreme over all the other deities. And so back in the Near Eastern culture, it was common for names to be associated with power and ability. And so what it does is it goes through in Tablet 7 and it lists all 50 names of other deities as Marduk, showing not that these other deities are Marduk, but that Marduk has what all of these other deities have because he is supreme over them. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm trying to type notes, but I
Nope,
am paying
you're
attention.
No worries. So that's pretty much Tablet 7 in a nutshell. So unless you have any other questions or things you want to interject, we'll roll into the comparative analysis with Genesis now. And then after that, we are going to talk about Nibiru. So
you can kick us off.
Okay. So now we're going to roll into the comparative analysis of Genesis. And wow, I guess that one pretty accurately too, 15-20 minute range for the actual content, and then rolling into comparative analysis. So, all right. So there are some vague similarities here with the Genesis account. They both do begin with primordial chaos. The Enuma Elish, you have the waters of Apsu and Tiamat, and they're both seen as being chaotic, and that's what Marduk brings order to. In Genesis, you have the statement, the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So you do have like a primordial chaos, a lack of being, a lack of order. You have a creation by separation. So Marduk splits Tiamat to form heaven and earth. God separates the waters above and below to create like the sky, or some might interpret it to be like a canopy of water that existed at that time, and then land, or the oceans on the earth's surface. And then you do also have celestial bodies being present to mark times and seasons. So there are different focuses amongst both of these texts. So Genesis, it's more of like kind of a quick passing thought of like God creates the sun to govern the day and the moon to govern the night. And oh yeah, he creates the stars too. Whereas the Enuma Elish puts in a lot of poetic thought to be like Marduk creates, 3 stars and associates it with each month, and he puts the moon in its place, the jewel of heaven in its place, and, lets it shine to kind of, bring light to the night kind of thing. So you have, much more of a poetic focus on this subject, as opposed to Genesis kind of just breezes over it. So before we go any further, I definitely want to delineate that amongst all creation stories, you are going to have some similarities, and that doesn't mean that one necessarily copies another, but you have to, with a creation story, by definition, you have to explain certain things. Like you have to address, how is humanity made? How is the earth made? Things like that. So you're going to have the same type of themes present regardless of like what creation myth. So just having some vague similar anecdotes doesn't necessarily mean that the Bible copied the Enuma Elish or vice versa. Does that make sense? Would you agree with that? Do you have anything to add?
No, I think you said that pretty well. I think it's just that a lot of different cultures have their own way of explaining things, but generally they stick to the same symbolism, if that makes sense.
Right.
They just have a different way of explaining it within that same method.
Yeah. So in the debate with Billy Carson and Wesley Huff, Billy Carson says that the Bible copied the Enuma Elish, which there's a huge problem there because Wesley asked a great question. He's like, okay, so where are the parallels? And Billy can only identify one, and it's separating the waters from the waters. Because that's what God does in a short aspect of creation, and that's also what happens in the Enuma Elish. But
because of the salt in the fresh water.
Well, that's Apsu and Tiamat, but talking about Marduk splitting Tiamat.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but you could also read the Apsu and Tiamat that way as well, as being two distinct types of waters.
No, I just got tripped up because you said splitting the waters and the waters, and I thought that's what you meant.
Yeah.
But that's fine.
But something like this doesn't necessarily mean one text copies another, because you have to think about this from multiple different faucets. Like, if this actually did happen in some capacity where there were waters separated in the creation of the world, you're going to have that told in different cultures in different ways. That doesn't necessarily mean that they copied each other. Maybe it's just different ways of passing down the same truth. It's also important to distinct that the waters that are split are not the deceased remains of a deity in Genesis, but that they are just there. There's no life really attributed to it. It serves a purpose
for the ecosystems that he is creating for other creations that he's...
Yeah. Which is interesting because Genesis seems to indicate that water was there from the beginning, before the beginning. Because, Genesis 1, I'm going to try to do this from memory. We'll see. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And it's specifically the Mayim usage in the Hebrew there. And then again, in Sumerian mythology here, in the beginning, what do we have? We have Apsu and Tiamat. We have waters that are intermingling together, and their intermingling creates something.
That's interesting.
So they hit similar themes, but they have very, very different spins on it. Whereas if the Bible was copying the Enuma Elish, it would have a lot more themes in common than just one brief thing like this. So just one similarity, if you're writing, like, let's say you're writing a paper for school, and you have a whole bunch of students in class that are writing a paper on the same subject. You might have occasional similarities in certain aspects of the papers, but that doesn't mean that they copied each other. You're going to see occasional overlaps pop up.
I have specifically run into that.
Yeah.
Already with my master's program and with my bachelor's.
Because you have like a copyright checker you have to run your paper through, and you'll
I have to stay below a certain percentage. But there are times that I have seen people, like in my discussion posts, that it's public, that everyone sees, like there's bound to be some overlap.
Yeah, you can only say certain words in so many combinations before it starts to get... For basic knowledge. Yeah, now obviously there is an actual thing as like, plagiarism.
Well, yes. Don't plagiarize.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Hey, you want to hear a word I made up? Plagiarism.
That's so stupid. I'm mad I laughed at that.
It's ironic too, because when you're in college and you read the section on plagiarism, it's the same. It's
plagiarized.
It's the same from one professor to another, almost like they copied and pasted the plagiarism section.
Here's the real thing, because professors use the same prompts every single time for their class. It is cookie cutter, no matter what.
Yeah.
Plagiarize their own material. But, anyways.
Yes, we got a little bit off topic there, but you will see certain similar thematic ideas pop up, such as like waters existing. So for example, let's hypothesize whichever way you want to approach it, whether you want to say, from a very biblical perspective, or whether you want to kind of make up your own belief system. Let's say that there was water in the beginning and that's all there was, and some deity shaped it, or some process amongst a pantheon of deities shaped it. You're going to see that same theme continue on throughout different religious contexts, if they attain that knowledge from like a common ancestor, like Noah or Utnapishtim, or Adra. No, it's not Adrastis. I don't think. I forget. Ziazudra. That's the one in the Akkadian. All the Noah figures in the different Mesopotamian mythologies.
I have no idea how you remember all of these.
Yeah,
Kudos
I
to
almost
you.
forgot. But you'll see all of these, these different figures for Noah mentioned by different names. Now, if that figure actually existed, he probably had information about how the world was created passed down to him from before the flood, and then he passed down, and then you have it just retold in different ways. So it doesn't mean that one text necessarily copied another. It's just common knowledge that's told in different ways.
Yeah.
So that's where Billy Carson gets it wrong. And that's the only thing he can cite is that the waters are separated from the waters. And he thinks that the Enuma Elish was the original source material for the Bible because of that. And it's like...
And that's just one thing.
Yeah. And then...
that just happened to be in that story.
Yeah. And then this also plays into the higher criticism as well that I talked about when my dad was on with episodes 19 and 20 about how it was disproved that the Bible copied... Babylonian stuff because there was a verse found from Deuteronomy that predated the Babylonian exile. So then you run into the problem of, okay, when would the Israelites have copied the Bible? So as it stands, I'm very much of the strong opinion from the research we've laid out in episodes 19 and 20 and our discussion here and our discussion from Gilgamesh that these are not, one is not a copy of the other, but that they are likely referring to a singular event that was passed down to him. Now, do you want to say that's true or false? That's an individual interpretation.
I mean, you have to think about the time period too, because that's how they communicated was through storytelling and,
oh yeah, of course,
traditions and all that.
Well, there's some historians that would theorize that like the Odyssey is a copy of Gilgamesh just retold in a very different way, which we'll talk about when we get there. Yeah. I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole right now, but I
also have some other comparative
hit us.
things that I don't think that we mentioned yet, but taking from Tiamat to make the cosmos, and it kind of reminded me from like taking from Adam to make Eve.
That's actually an interesting one. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, and then the blood from Kingu and clay for mankind, but then Adam was created with dust and a breath. Yeah. So there's elements of earth to create,
and I think
mankind.
I'm trying to remember where I saw this in all my studies, but it's all kind of a blur. I think that dust and clay is a very small distinction that might actually just be more of a translation error than literal dust and literal clay, where the word for dust or clay might even be like a same or very similar word across both of these different, not like from Hebrew to the cuneiform, but that like in cuneiform and in Hebrew, dust and clay is like means the same
like
thing.
Interchangeable.
I think. Yeah, I think I could be wrong on that. I'm speculating, but I do think I saw something about that somewhere in all my readings. So
well, and then also the purpose for which mankind was created, because in this story, Enuma Elish, they were created to serve the gods, right? Mm-hmm. And then in Genesis, they were basically created to, multiply and rule creation, like rule the animals and all that. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting too, just the purpose of mankind. And I think we saw something where in Enuma Elish, like making mankind, like creating mankind was more of an afterthought. Yeah,
that was kind of my observation in the video. That's probably where you're getting that from. But humans are created, but it's at the request of the Anunnaki, or more. I don't think it's blatantly stated in the Enuma Elish that it's at their request, but they more kind of mention or that they're weary of all their work, and so Marduk comes up with a solution to it. Versus in Genesis, it's like man and woman, mankind is like the crowning point of God's creation. In fact, God doesn't even say that everything is very good until Eve is created, I believe. Yeah. So it's like his whole creation isn't even complete until mankind is there.
Yeah, because he saw something was missing.
Yeah.
So
no, I agree. I think you hit a good point. They're both created to work, but mankind is more created to steward and to name the animals and to invest emotionally and have a relationship. Whereas in the Enuma Elish, it's more, we're creating you
slaves.
We're creating basically slaves from chaos, from a chaos deity's blood, and mixing it with dirt.
Yeah.
So That being said, let's take a quick pause here and we'll come back with some more comparative analysis discussion. All right, ladies and gentlemen, mystery seekers, musers, and here we are uncovering that mythical matrix for you. We had to bleep out the first intro because instead of uncovering, I said uncovering.
Uncovering.
Yeah. So, yep, zero mistakes here. I deleted it out so we had a smooth transition, but I'll own up to it. It's a fair mistake, so we're all
cute.
honest here on musings on mysteries and the mythical matrix.
Yes, we love a good mistake.
So back to some more comparative analysis here.
Should I say what I just said?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
That Tiamat, that's a difference too, that they took from Tiamat to make the cosmos, whereas in Genesis, they took from Adam to create another, human.
Yeah.
So they're still taking from the body, but it's to create something different in a sense.
You see vague ideas that are similar, but this isn't enough to say that one text blatantly copied the other, because we should see a lot more similarities than we do if one text copied the other.
To chalk it up to just copying every single time, no matter what story you read, is, I think, to really oversimplify.
I agree. Especially when you start seeing stuff with the flood, because Bible and Mesopotamian, they all have flood stories. Okay, fine. You could maybe argue some of those copied another. I don't think there's room for it, but you could argue it. Mm-hmm. But then you start running into things like where Greece and Norse and Aztec all have flood myths as well. Not to mention that there's other cultures around the world that also have flood myths that were very isolated. And at a certain point, you have all of these cultures referencing the deluge as in, a noun, like we talked about on Gilgamesh, where it's not a deluge, not a time it rained, the time it rained.
Yeah.
Indicating that there was something bigger that happened. So I don't think that there's a lot of room to, wiggle around that. I agree with you. I think it's oversimplifying it to just be like, they all just copied each other. Because the thing is here is you're looking at this creation account, you don't even get the creation of order until in the cosmos until about halfway through, until end of tablet 4 or tablet 5.
And even order is
it's very systematic, as Marduk is assigning roles to all these different deities and what they're to reign, and that's not how Genesis flows at all.
This one, to me, is more authoritarian.
Yes.
And Genesis is more
relational.
Yes.
Which strongly reflects how the Babylonians saw things. They were the bringers of order, to the chaos of the world with their rules and their laws.
Well, and that really played into political and society values too, which is shown in this story. So
but it's if Genesis was copying the Enuma Elish, we would see a lot more pre-creation of God. Maybe we would see God battling Lucifer or Satan or the snake, because that's a huge thing, there was obviously some type of conflict there, but we're just not told about it in Genesis.
Because I think with Genesis, I may be wrong, but it comes off as more humble beginnings for Genesis versus, Marduk. Obviously they really play on his victory of Tiamat. And I'm not going to say that that's not humble, because you should be proud of winning, but I think that there's a vast difference with that too, in and of itself.
There's even a line in the Enuma Elish that talks about how the Anunnaki kiss Marduk's feet at one point due to his victory in his creation of the cosmos and his creation of man. Yeah, basically worshiping and submitting completely to his authority. Mm-hmm. You don't even see remotely anything like that about Yahweh in Genesis. There's no mention of the angelic hosts praising his name for his creation. There's really no mention of even man praising his name for being created. It's just all this stuff is stated and discussed as being factual.
You mean in Genesis?
In Genesis, yeah.
Okay, because I know there are parts in the Bible where people do wash his feet and all of that.
Yes, you do have that for sure, but not in Genesis.
Yeah.
So I just think that that's really interesting, because you have so many distinctions here. Mm-hmm. You have polytheism with a pantheon. You have many different deities. Versus you have one singular deity that's technically the Trinity, if you want to look at it from a Christian instead of a Judaistic worldview from Genesis. So you have some very strong differences. You have a violent creation occurring in the Enuma Elish, and you have a intentional and peaceful creation in Genesis, where death doesn't happen until the fall of man and man rebelling against God, that is when death is initiated into the world. Versus with the Enuma Elish, death is occurring from before the beginning.
From the get-go.
It's literally the first gods that exist, they both die. And that's kind of how things start. So it's a very different, it's really apples to oranges looking at these stories here.
In that regard.
Yeah. Genesis emphasizes very peaceful creation through divine speech. God speaks and things happen, versus the Enuma Elish is about violent conflict and having to kill and destroy and backstab and betray before you get betrayed, and all these things going on.
That's another thing too that I didn't think about was just the concept of betrayal. Because we have Eve taking a bite of the apple, and then in a sense she kind of betrays Adam too, getting him to eat it.
That's true.
And betraying God because of his word, but his command. So it's like 2 acts of betrayal technically in Genesis if you want to look at it that way. Yeah,
no, that's a very good thought.
But then betrayal in Enuma Elish.
Yeah. Betrayal is a result that leads to death in Genesis versus like and it's an after result of creation and chaos being brought into creation, versus you have chaos and betrayal and death occurring in the beginning in the Enuma Elish, and then that chaos is brought into order by Marduk, versus chaos is introduced into order by mankind after God creates it in Genesis. So yeah, no, that's a great thought, babe. Good job.
Yay, so, I'm learning.
Let's see here. So I actually had a theory as I was listening to all of this, and I think that these 2 stories could. This is speculative. This is my speculation. This is not fact, of course, but this is just me looking at this and applying a deeper comparative mythology lens to it. But you have Ea or Enki is the one that warns Noah, the Noah figure, depending on which one you're reading, about the flood that's coming. So you have as well, God shows up and warns Noah of the flood. So my thought is that maybe in some capacity here, the Babylonians are holding on to kernels of truth about a primordial battle, but they've twisted it for their ends instead of leaving the truth as the truth. And that maybe Ea represents Yahweh in some capacity, but they've changed it to fit their polytheistic pantheon view, and that Marduk maybe represents Jesus in some capacity, or like the pre-creation, Genesis version of Jesus.
Who would be the Holy Spirit then?
That's a good question. I don't really have an answer on that one, but
there's also another question I had when you were saying about that, and I just lost it.
Well, think about it for a minute.
I'll try.
I'll keep ranting on this one for a minute.
Go for it, babe.
But yeah, so and then you have Ea being Marduk's father, and that's again how Jesus is depicted as being the son of God. Go ahead, what do you have?
Yes, so I just got it. So you know how God basically warned Noah of the flood, but didn't he also command him to build? Yeah. So do we see that in the Enuma Elish too, where she warns, Ea warns, but does she command?
Ea is a he, I believe.
Yeah,
he? Yeah. Ea. Well, Enki is a he. Yes, it's a he. But yes.
So does he then, command to take
this is
measures against it, or
this is jumping ahead, but yes.
Sorry.
It's fine. So this is from the Adrahasis epic, I believe. I'm shooting off the hip. I might be wrong. I might be mixing up my stories here. It's either that. No, it is Adrahasis. Yeah. 90% sure.
I mean, I wouldn't know. So.
Anyway, so this is jumping ahead. So we'll talk about this more when we get to Adrahasis. And then if I'm royally wrong, I'll confirm it there.
Well, it's good that I am thinking good things.
Yes. But so what happens is that Ea, the pantheon of gods decide that they're going to destroy the world because humanity becomes too loud. And it's kind of the same thing with the reason Apsu wanted to destroy the younger gods is because their clamor disrupts my peace. It's too.
Oh, so
it's
like
too
a
loud.
literal loud sense, not like a poetic loud sense.
It could be poetic. It could have more meaning, but that's what's said. So the gods decide to destroy.
So petty.
The gods decide to destroy humanity with a flood, and Ea, Enki, is sworn to secrecy, but so he can't tell humanity directly. But he goes out and he knows that Utnapishtim or Ziazudra, depending on, which version we're talking about here. He goes out and he knows Ziazudra, Utnapishtim, Noah, all same figure, is around. And he says not to him, but to the reeds that are around him. Reeds, oh reeds, hear my command. Go build a vessel for yourself where its length and its width are in harmony, and gives all these instructions, and bring food and bring animals and all of these things. And the Noah figure is like, he's sitting there, he's like, oh crap, I gotta go do all this stuff because there's a big flood coming.
He's like, why is he talking to reeds?
Yeah. And so Ea gets around everything by warning this
That's so funny.
Utnapishtim Zecharia figure. And then, that's how humanity is saved.
If that isn't a loophole, I don't know what is. That is hilarious.
But again, Ea displays these clever, cunning, wise, almost magical traits at certain points to kind of have loopholes to get around this. Yeah. So
he'd be a good lawyer.
You do see these similarities between like where these deities are playing roles. And that's where I'm thinking like Ea being the father of this son that then goes out and conquers all, and that then creates like that. And Ea still plays a role in creating mankind, actually. It's at Marduk's command, but Ea is the one that actually like executes Kingu and helps mix the blood together with his magical ability. And so you do have like, and that's another thing, magic is largely about spells. It's about speaking. Mm-hmm. So, what if this is the Babylonians like kind of twisted way of some deeper truth? And you do start to see these parallels connected, but they are very convoluted. So convoluted, it becomes clear that they're not copies, but it's more likely they're telling us about the same thing deep down.
Just in their own way.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of my final thought on the Enuma Elish itself, is that it would function more as like a prequel to creation than actual creation itself. Where yes, Marduk goes through and assigns places to the different deities for what they are to control over, but it's just kind of like I'm going to bring order to all of this chaos that's left over, and here's how we're going to do it kind of a thing, versus like Genesis, that is the whole narrative and story.
It seems like in Genesis, a lot more thought is put into it and the build up to the creation of mankind.
Yeah.
Like the whole purpose of mankind was created before mankind itself. It seems a lot more planned out than Enuma Elish.
Yes, exactly. It's just kind of, we've got to bring order to all this chaos from this death. How do we do that? Let's just fashion the world. Versus Genesis, it's very intentional. Well, that being said, we're going to shift gears here a little bit. We're going to take a brief pause, and then we're going to come back. I'm actually going to take everything we've talked about and flip it all on its head and make you all think about it in another dimension when we return. And we will be indeed talking about Nibiru when we come back. So stick around if you want to find out about the 12th planet that's rogue and wandering our solar system. We have returned, just like Nibiru, 3,600 years later, quantumly, of course, to bring you this afterthought almost to this episode, just like creation was almost an afterthought in the Enuma Elish. All right. So we're going to talk about Nibiru. So Nibiru has largely been popularized by Zecharia Sitchin. I'm trying to think. He was in, I want to say like the 60s, 70s, 80s. This was a huge thing. And then Billy Carson has jumped on that bandwagon and then taken it to the next level. But basically, what they theorize here is that Nibiru is mentioned in the Enuma Elish, and that's why I want to talk about it here. I think it's mentioned in a couple other Sumerian texts as well, but it's primarily Mesopotamian, texts, but it's primarily mentioned in the Enuma Elish. So I wanted to hit on it while we're here because I did a good bit of digging into it, and I actually came to a discovery, which if you've watched my Nibiru video, you're already aware of where this is going. But so Nibiru is only referenced a couple times, but Zecharia Sitchin proposes that it is a planet that the Anunnaki live on that passes through our solar system every 3,600 years. Where he gets that from is primarily the Sumerian Kings List, which is a document that we are going to address at a later time. But the Sumerian Kings List references kings reigning for 36,000 years and like 42,000 years and all sorts of ridiculous, like really long numbers. So he theorizes that this isn't about kings, but it's actually about planets, which I don't understand quite exactly how he's getting there. But it's a little bit of a leap.
It's a bit out there.
So, but let's break this down. Let's make this a little bit plausible for a minute here. So, taking a step back in our comparative mythology journey here, I love referencing Critias and Timaeus, which tell us about Atlantis. The Egyptian priests tell Solon that they have the Greeks have this one myth, and they go on to explain to him that you've turned this into a mythology account, but it's actually about declination of celestial bodies. So that sets a precedent for us that there's a confusing at times of what celestial bodies actually do and what these created deities actually do. And that's why we have a lot of like the planet names that we have is it derives from different deities. I think most of ours derive from Roman deities, which they co-opted Greek primarily. But like you have Mars is the god of war. Venus is the goddess of wisdom. That would be Athena in Greek mythology. And so you have, I'm trying to think, Mercury, I want to say was, no, I'm trying to think. The guy with the wings on his heels. I forget him. Why am I forgetting him?
I don't think that's Mercury. He's the messenger guy, right?
Yeah, I think Mercury is. I think Mercury is, but no, he goes under a different name. Anyway. But there you have all these connections. Yeah, go ahead and Google it. Fact check me. But you have all these connections to deities amongst all of these different religions, and you see this reference here where these deities are correlated to Atlantis, or not Atlantis, excuse me, in the Atlantis discussions, where deities are correlated to celestial bodies moving, and so that might be another way to read this. And so that's actually a whole nother way you could even read the Enuma Elish, is that it's not even a battling of literal deities, but that it's a moving of a number of celestial bodies, and that Tiamat might even be a planet that gets ripped in half, and that something else is formed out of by other planets. And then that's where the myth starts to convolute, and well, then how did mankind get created out of, a planet? What do you got? You got a fact check for me? Yeah, Hermes, thank you.
But that's the wings sandals allows them to move quickly between mortal and divine. Is that who you meant? The guy?
Yeah, fact check. That should be Mercury. Is that Mercury? Fact check me. I might be wrong. I've not brushed up on my Greek. I'm focusing a lot on Mesopotamian. But yeah, so that is another way to look at this here too, is that it's not talking so much. Okay. So Hermes is Mercury in the Roman pantheon.
Yes.
So, but that's another way to look at this here, is that this isn't an account of so much deities, but it could even be planets or even forces, like that maybe the Mesopotamians were giving names to like these forces of water and assigning an identity to them just to describe the forces, if that makes sense. Like describing a storm, like how we name storms, like Hurricane Katrina kind of thing. Assigning a name and a persona to it, even though there's actually no persona there, it's just a way to represent it in story form. And this is where deciphering mythology can get confusing, because there's a lot of different ways to read it. In fact, you see a lot of similarities as well across cultures. So for example, Marduk is the supreme deity to the Babylonians. He's also a storm god. You have Zeus is a storm god. They are both connected to Jupiter by both of these cultures. And then the Romans, I think Jupiter is their Latin name for Zeus. I could be mistaken on that. That's my conjecture. And then you have storm gods all throughout that play a prominent role, like Thor, Norse mythology, Baal in Canaanite mythology that pops up in the Bible. He is a storm deity. You have storm deities popping up like all over culture. It points to the similar storm deity, whether you want to say it's a planet or whether you want to say it's some kind of Nephilim or whether you want to say it's both. This exists, and it's a fair comparison point to draw on. All that being said, that whole idea plays a little bit into the Nibiru discussion about Nibiru being a planet.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
Did you have anything that you want to add in on that? Because I see you have your phone out and you look like you have something you want to say.
I was just kind of looking at the whole idea of Nibiru, and it.
Yeah.
I saw something that says represents the star of destiny and is the celestial body that leads the way for gods in the heavens.
So it's highly dependent on translation. So I'm
Yeah.
going to actually read some quick excerpts from Stephanie Dawley's Myths of Mesopotamia here. So I'm going to read from page 225, the beginning of tablet 5 here. He, referring to Marduk, I believe in this context, fashioned stands for the great gods. As for the stars, he set up constellations corresponding to them. He designated the year and marked out its divisions, apportioned 3 stars each to the 12 months. And this is what we talked about with Marduk. So it is indeed Marduk. When he had made plans of the day of the year, he founded the stand of Nibiru to mark out their courses, so that none of them could go wrong or stray. He fixed the stand of Enlil and Ea together with it. And then again, I'm going to jump ahead to tablet 7 here, which I've been flipping back and forth between these so much. It's like 20 pages later and it just instantly flipped open. It's pages 272 and 273 now. Nibiru, he does indeed hold the crossings of heaven and earth. Neither up nor down shall they cross over. They must wait on him. Nibiru is his star, which is bright in the sky. He controls the crossroads. They must look to him, saying, he who kept crossing inside Tiamat without respite shall have Nibiru as his name, grasping her middle. May he establish the paths of the heavenly stars, and may he shepherd all the gods like sheep. Let him defeat Tiamat, constrict her breath, and shorten her life, so that for future people, till time grows old, she shall be far removed, not kept here, distant forever. Because he had created the place, heaven, and fashioned Danina, earth. So I read these 2 passages here because it's important that when we're discussing something like Nibiru, with how wild Sitchin wants to get, it's important that we are grounded in what the texts actually say, once again.
It's more like Nibiru and Marduk are both seen as just divine celestial beings?
In a sense. So Nibiru is specifically referenced here in Tablet 7, referring to, again, a name of Marduk, but not actually a name of Marduk. It's something that Marduk has power over. Mm-hmm. So it's important to keep that in mind. Let's see here. Yeah, so my theory is that when I believe that in the cuneiform, the word for star can refer to a number of different things. It doesn't necessarily mean star or planet, it just means anything celestially. That's my understanding of it. So Nibiru is described not so much as a planet, but more as a crossing point. Like, think of it more like a horizon. Like it's a place, it marks out the path of something. And this is where I have my theory, specifically in reference to Tablet 5 here in the section that I read about where it references Ea or Enki and Enlil. So Enlil is connected to Saturn in Mesopotamian mythology, and Ea is connected to Mercury in Mesopotamian mythology. Mm-hmm. So each of these, it's interesting that these 2 are referenced discussing Nibiru, because if you look at this from a planetary cycle, you have Ea, who would be Mercury, who is the foremost of the small planets. He is the head of the small planets. He's closest to the sun. Mm-hmm. And then you have Enlil, who is Saturn, who is the head of the gas giants, excluding Jupiter, because Jupiter is reserved for Marduk, who is the head of the entire solar system. Mm. So Saturn is head of, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all that. You have these 2, and it references that in the same context that he's fixing the stand of Enlil and Ea together with it. Almost like that there's like some kind of crossing point or boundary between them that Nibiru is establishing, because they must wait on Nibiru in a sense. And then it's referred to as a crossroads here in Tablet 7. He controls the crossroads, he referring to Nibiru. They must look to him. So, and then there's certain points where it seems in text, and I believe I'm reading this right from Dr. Heiser, which we'll talk about him in a minute, but he is a scholar of these texts, and he talks about how, he talks about Nibiru a lot, he debunks a lot of Sitchin's ideas, but what his proposition is, I think at certain points that Nibiru is confused with both Jupiter and Mercury at certain points, which lends to my idea here that Nibiru might actually just be the asteroid belt. That maybe the Mesopotamians had some kind of like telescope to be able to see this boundary point at one time, and they described it in their mythology, encoded it in their mythology, and then it got lost. And when they lost the ability to be able to see that with telescopes, it got kind of lumped together with Jupiter because it's a boundary point that they couldn't actually see. And that's why you see it being referenced as so vague. at certain points as this crossing point.
I mean, if you want to think about just pathway, an asteroid belt would symbolize a pathway a little bit more than a planet would.
Right,
like
exactly.
just the shape of it and the layout of it.
And what else I think is interesting here is that he who kept crossing inside Tiamat without rest shall have Nibiru as his name, grasping her middle. So it's emphasizing that it's in the middle here. It's in the middle of the separation. So you could even read this as maybe being the horizon of Earth itself. But you could also read this as maybe Tiamat being an actual planet that passed through our solar system at one point that was ripped to pieces, and the asteroid belt is all that's left of this planet of Tiamat. Because think about it, if you had a water planet at the core, you would have some kind of rocky material, and that rocky material gets ripped to pieces and becomes the asteroid belt and is destroyed by Marduk, the large gas giant, in some major collision that happens. So this is another way to look at it, is that maybe Nibiru so much isn't the rogue planet, but that it was Tiamat that was the rogue planet, and that Jupiter, Marduk, saved our solar system from that in a sense and destroyed Tiamat, and that Nibiru is the remains of Tiamat. It's another way to read it.
Yeah.
But if you're going,
interesting.
If you're going to look at it from a planetary context, you have to also associate the passages with that. And from the passages I've read, there's nothing to indicate that Nibiru enters our solar system every 3,600 years and that the Anunnaki live there and that the Anunnaki are going to return once again. Nibiru is referenced as this fixing point that was once inside of Tiamat and that was bouncing around, and that Marduk set into place as a pathway. And then it references other deities that would be associated with Mercury and Saturn that would follow the same pattern of path. So in this context from everything we're talking about, if you want to read star myths into this, I think there's room for that. But you have to keep the context of the text. This would more likely be referring to the asteroid belt than some rogue planet that you want to overinterpret the text to fit your agenda. Because that's, from what I've heard of Sitchin's speeches and everything and what he talks about, it seems like he's more coming at this with confirmation bias rather than reading what's actually there.
Was he part of the movement that kind of made Nibiru seem like a doomsday theory for Earth? Because that was a big thing too.
I think so, yeah, with the Anunnaki returning.
Yeah, because you mentioned that.
There might be other people, yeah.
But there was a whole thing about like doomsday theories associated with Nibiru. And
because it was lined up, I think, at one point with the Mayan calendar or something around there.
Yeah, the end of the world in 2012.
Everyone was freaking out about that, and the return of Nibiru was going to be at the same time if you were on the more fringe.
Yeah.
So let's see how we're doing on time here, because I haven't even looked at that. Let's see if I can get a little bit further here. Maybe we can get to working on the conclusion right around the time we take a break.
Yep.
So one other thing I'll hit on. So I'll hit on Dr. Heiser real quick first. He has a lot of good information. It's funny because I heard on Brothers of the Serpent for years, the website sitchiniswrong.com. And I always thought it was just a tongue-in-cheek joke about like, oh yeah, people say Sitchin is wrong without any grounded reason. But no, sitchiniswrong.com is an actual website by an actual scholar that got angry that Sitchin wanted to take these texts that he's a scholar of and twist them for his own ends. It's kind of similar to how I feel about Billy Carson at certain points. So it's kind of funny. Maybe I should make a website, billycarsoniswrong.com.
I feel like after this recent debate, that would be so popular if you did do that.
Yeah, that might help the MQuad channel take off exponentially. Take off with ancient astronauts and travel the world and the universe with Nibiru. Anyway, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get that petty. But so that's where I'm getting that from. Dr. Heiser has a lot of good research out there. I've only just recently started scratching the surface of a lot of it. He seems to be pretty well grounded for the most part. But he would probably have issue with my idea of the Mesopotamians having more advanced telescopes. It seems like he's a very strict scholar.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of in the middle where it's like, I'm okay with the fringe, but we have to interpret the fringe accurately, logically, academically. We can't just put fringe in because we want there to be fringe. We can't just change the myths to fit our agenda. We have to look at the myths, apply logic and reason, and say, what can we actually fairly guess from this? And that's my approach.
I mean, the whole thing is if you're changing stuff to fit your narrative, you're not really helping anybody, including yourself.
Exactly. You're just deceiving people. So that being said, for our listeners, you might want to pull out your phones or something to do a Google search. So I'm going to say a couple things here. So this is another thing that plays into Sitchin's idea. He references a specific seal from the Mesopotamians, and he uses this as an argument that the Mesopotamians had more knowledge of the solar system than we realize. So it's cylinder seal VA243. Cylinder seal VA243. And that'll pop up a whole bunch of pictures of the same seal. But if you look in the top left section of this seal, between the two people that are on the left side, you will see a circle with star points on it, and then a whole bunch of other circles around it. So what Sitchin theorizes is that these are all the planets of the solar system, and that big star in the middle is the sun, and he uses this to play into his idea of Nibiru. This is a huge leap, and I stumbled upon this 2 days ago on sheer accident. So I opened up my phone, and the first reel that popped up was about an ancient seal, or not an ancient seal. It's an ancient map. So Google now, for our listeners, Babylonian map of the world is the oldest map of the world that we are aware of. Britannica has a great source on this one. Looks like Bible Origins also has a good image as well. But pull up an image of this, and you'll see a fragmented tablet piece. It would be about the size of your hand, I believe. Yeah, that's pretty close. This is what I'm looking at here. But if you look at that there, I was looking at this and thinking, those points look identical to the same positioning almost that you see on the seal that Sitchin references, the VA243 seal. Mm-hmm. And then it also came to my attention, because I started looking into this, the Mesopotamians use a number of different visual depictions to depict the sun. Not once is this visual you see in seal VA243 used to depict the sun. In Mesopotamia, like there's a number of different symbologies that are used across Mesopotamian myth. Like it'll be like a circle with wings on it, or it'll be a circle that has like a north, south, east, west kind of star thing on it, and then it'll have squiggly lines on like the north, northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest kind of things. But you don't see the specific shape. So you look at this here, and seal VA243 does not have a map in the middle of it. But what I would propose is that since this is a very small seal, what is being described here is that it's not a map of the solar systems, but it's simply a map of the world, or indicating a map of the world that maybe they had up on the wall or something. And so here you see that, where a little knowledge becomes a dangerous thing, where Zecharia Sitchin looks at all of this and infers that this is some planetary indication here, but there's no precedent for that in Mesopotamian mythology, that this symbol even represents the star. This looks more like the symbol to represent Earth, and how the Babylonians drew their map of Earth, where it's a circle and the different arrow points on it were pointing to different kingdoms and everything. So I give you all this information as the listeners. You can do your own research and fact check me on this. If you find any errors I made, please email me at m.quad.musings@gmail.com. What do you got, babe?
Also, the seal. I looked up a couple of different pictures of the seal, and I actually found one that is labeled with planets. So I'll let you look at it.
Oh yeah, that's from Zecharia Sitchin's ideas.
So I mean, it depends what image you're looking at, because some of them are labeled like specifically for the planets, and then some of them are just like blank and show you the actual picture. Labeled as afterthoughts by editors, not labeled by the Sumerians themselves. Yeah, well, I mean, that's... Yeah, important distinction. I just want to clarify. Yes, if you see the picture that if you magically see the picture that I'm looking at, you would know, but... Yeah. But I invite the listeners to go check this out, to look up those two things that I referenced, the Bitter River Mesopotamia map, or you could also just look up the Babylonian map of the world, either of those. And then you can look at that and compare it to the seal and seal VA243, and you're going to see that these two are very, very similar, and they might not quite be identical. In seal VA243, it's not filled in as the map, but it's the same shape.
And the shape meant something different to them than, star, like sun. So, yeah. Any other thoughts you want to interject on that?
No.
But that was just something I purely on accident discovered, because I was like, I had just done all sorts of research on Sitchin, and then I came upstairs and like I popped open my phone and that seal popped up, and I'm like, wait a second, I've seen this shape before. It's on the seal. This is Earth. This is Babylonia. This is not. This is Mesopotamia. This is not like the sun.
Yeah.
So, that's my conjecture on it. So you've got to look at the context, and there's no precedent for what Sitchin proposes, with this symbology. So all that being said, we're going to take a quick break, come back, and then we're going to talk a little bit about a recent CIA release. And then we are going to close out the show. So stay tuned. This will be a long one. We'll be right back. And we've returned, apparently, according to the CIA, we've returned from astral projection from Mars, where we've discovered deep in ancient history that there was water and pyramids and a civilization on Mars that was somehow destroyed. Or at least that's what the CIA claims. I don't know. I've been focusing on Mesopotamian research. I've just seen stuff popping up about this stuff on my feed recently. But apparently the CIA have somehow used astral projection to do some sort of time travel to investigate things that happened on Mars. What do you think about that?
How do I say it without getting too political? Because
I mean, it's the CIA. Well, we'll leave it at that. It's the CIA.
Yeah, I was gonna say something like mildly controversial, but
oh boy, not don't do it political controversial on the
won't.
show.
I won't, but it has been proven in the past, so it's a true statement, but it is still controversial.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Yes, I'm not gonna say it,
you.
but just explaining.
Yeah,
why I'm not gonna say it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, but so we were talking about this a little bit today in the car as we were running some errands, and it's like, how do you even begin to quantify that as truth or even false? Like,
how do you even prove it?
How do you prove or disprove something like that? You can't. Like, okay, so number one, this is assuming that astral projection works the way we think it works. Yeah. Because astral projection, because I've looked into this before. I stumbled on it with lucid dreaming because I wanted to try lucid dreaming. And I found out that astral projection and lucid dreaming is kind of like the gateway out of astral projection, in a sense that you learn to lucid dream. That's the first phase many times to being able to astral project. Mm-hmm. For those of our listeners not aware, I've talked about this with Isaiah on the quantum computer AI demon episode that we did. I think it's 28, I want to say 29, something in there. But that episode with Isaiah, we've talked about it. If you missed that episode, that'll explain a lot about astral projection, a lot of interesting thoughts there. Long story short, it's basically when you can project your spirit out of your body to go see other things, and your body stays there, but you're unconscious, your body's unconscious, your spirit travels around. Like
if you ever watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, think about Aang, leaving his body to go to the spiritual world.
Yes, that's astral projection. About that. Yes, exactly. So that's supposedly what the CIA did in their research, and they went to Mars astral projecting, and they somehow traveled into the past through astral projection, which that's a whole nother rabbit hole. I don't even know how that would work. And that they saw this ancient civilization. It's like, well, what does that prove? Number one, okay, how do we know that astral projection works the way we think it does? Because lucid dreaming, maybe you were more lucid dreaming and creating your reality that you wanted to see instead of astral projecting.
Because you can, in a way, manipulate your dreams.
Yeah, that's lucid dreaming. Yeah.
Yes. Well, there's a way to train yourself, and I've read up on this too with lucid dreaming, where you can train yourself to realize when you are dreaming. And that is also the beginning phases of lucid dreaming. So you realize you are dreaming. And when you realize when you realize that you're dreaming, then you can manipulate the dream.
Right.
So I read a story about how somebody trained themselves to do this. It was looking at a clock. and trying to look at the time. And if the time was all distorted or there were hands missing on the clock, then they knew that they were dreaming. And that's sort of how you train yourself. That's one method.
Because you can't read stuff in dreams. Like it looks like AI when you try to read stuff like AI jarbled text.
Or like Salvador Dali's.
Which that's a whole nother rabbit
clock.
hole. That's a whole nother rabbit hole of like, is AI just a lucid dream? Anyway.
Yeah.
But no, you're on the right track. Yes. And I think Nikola Tesla would do this as well, where he would hold a ball in his hand and he would like, as he would fall asleep, he would drop the ball and it would kind of wake him up. And then he would realize he was entering a dream state.
Yeah.
And that would give him the ability to control his dreams.
The thing is too, like you said about what if you're just dreaming what you're hoping to see? And there is a way that you can manipulate your dreams that way too, is, if you're reading or looking at something or thinking about something that much, you're more than likely to dream about it too, I believe. Because then, that's the last thing that's on your conscious mind.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a theory. I don't know if that's scientifically proven, but that's more of a theory for me.
Right. And then, so the next thing that we got to think about, so obviously there's lucid dreaming angle that we've discussed here, but you've also got to think about like, how do you like we theorize on the show, the fourth dimension existence, the spiritual. If you're playing around with the fourth dimension through astral projecting, which is your spiritual act. So yes, you're clearly messing with the fourth dimension. You're messing with stuff you don't understand. How do you know you're seeing it and understanding it correctly? How do you know that there's not some other entity? Because a lot of people that astral project will report there's a whole hierarchy of these entities. Some mean you good, supposedly. Some mean you severe harm. How do we know that this isn't some kind of like psyop or something, not even by the CIA, but by some entities that are beyond our understanding, that are manipulating space-time reality? There's no way, there's no way to prove or disprove this. There's no way to quantify it.
I'm trying to think of the technology too behind it, because how would the CIA know? Like, how would the CIA monitor that? It
would be reports from people doing astral projection that are working with the CIA, I think. That would be my understanding.
After. And they wake up and then they tell them. Because I'm trying to think, if they're monitoring them during it. I mean, I know there's some sci-fi movies out there where like some technology was connected to their brain and they got to see what the other person was seeing.
I don't think we have that yet. We are getting close though. There's imaging stuff that's close.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about technology like that, and that would be really the only way that I can think that would be proven is if we had that technology.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing that we've found with our rovers that I'm aware of that would indicate anything like the base of a pyramid. That should be very clear and prominent, because I mean, the Giza pyramids have existed for incredibly long time, depending on how you want to quantify that and define that time.
I'm also thinking about, for my bachelor's program, I had to take like 3 stats classes, like with psychology. I feel like a big limitation to this study is if they know what they're looking for before they try astral projection, because that is a huge breach then if they know that that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah. But like, then how do you even quantify what, like, you can't quantify what you're seeing too.
Because it is kind of like a confirmation bias in and of itself. If you know that that's what you're searching for and you do it and then you tell somebody about it, like that is kind of like that.
Especially with lucid dreaming.
Yes.
Because you're creating your own reality. So it's like, it's like the, what was it that you just said? Confirmation bias, but exponentially applied.
Yeah. And anything can happen in a dream, so.
Yeah. So I take that with multiple grains of salt.
Yeah.
Interesting side thought, though, is we're talking about Mars. They indicated there was some kind of water calamity on Mars with this astral projection. And there is water erosion that exists on Mars. I will give them that. There is water on Mars that is now frozen at the poles.
The thing is, what were their knowledge?
Hang on, let me finish this.
Sorry.
What I think is interesting is that we're talking about all this stuff with Tiamat and potentially being a planet that was water that crashed through our solar system. So what if Tiamat had some kind of impact or connection with Mars along with Jupiter before the planet of Tiamat itself was destroyed? And maybe the water on Mars is not the water from Mars, but it's the water from the planet Tiamat.
You were saying about like the what? Like, what if what was it, Nibiru, like a planet of water, and like the
Well, Tiamat is the planet of water. Nibiru would have been the remains of Tiamat in the asteroid
okay,
belt.
because like I had that question where it was like, well, where would the water have gone if it was a planet of water?
Maybe
that answers that.
Maybe half of it got split into Mars and half of it got split onto Earth.
That's interesting.
I don't know. That's
trippy.
There's a lot of different ways.
about.
There's a lot of different ways to think about it, but that is another question too: is where did the water from Mars come from? But was it always there? How do you quantify that? Especially depending on whichever worldview you pick.
What I was gonna say was their knowledge beforehand going into this, if they knew that there was water on Mars too, like that would also be a form of confirmation. But if they knew that like beforehand that was there, that was just something that they probably wanted to see.
Yeah. Now I haven't read the actual study. Maybe I'm getting that wrong.
I don't know. I'm just going off of what you said, so I may be wrong too.
But yeah.
But it boils down to that same point. Like if they knew beforehand what they were supposed to be looking at before trying lucid dreaming or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, before when I was a kid, I wanted to be the first person on Mars. That was like a huge dream of mine. I actually was at a conference that Buzz Aldrin was speaking at, and I asked him about that and like what he thought I should do to get to that end. But I'm trying to think. So I was a huge Mars nerd, obviously. There is nothing I'm aware of that would resemble pyramids. Maybe there's more information that came out since like I was curious about all this stuff, but like I'm not aware of anything that would resemble pyramids on Mars. The only thing was that they did imaging from space with a satellite around Mars. They thought they saw a face structure built onto Mars with the imaging, and then they went in and investigated with the rover, and it turns out it was like an error in the imaging, like that it wasn't actually a face. It was just like like how you can kind of see shapes sometimes in the, like see a face in like certain tiles or something like that, like certain like paint splatters. It was something like that, but with the imaging, where the imaging read it wrong, and it was nowhere near like a face built out of the earth. It was just like this huge like like concave
like
mess.
It's just the grain of the picture made it look that way.
Well, it wasn't even so much that.
Or was it a very clear picture?
It was the shape of the rocks and everything too, but just at that angle it was misread, and it was nowhere near what was thought to be.
Yeah.
So I mean,
pyramids.
I don't know of any pyramids on Mars or anything resembling pyramids on Mars.
Do they mean actual like
actual built pyramids? That's my understanding. I haven't had time to read the actual article, but
because I'm also thinking about, okay, if you look at molecular structure, if you look at like that sort of like, I don't know, there's a lot of other interpretations for pyramids, but they mean like actual built pyramids. Like Egyptian pyramids. Mm-hmm. That's weird.
That's what they're proposing right there. That just looks
For
like...
those of you who don't know, Jay just pulled up a picture.
Yeah, I Googled pyramids on Mars.
Freaky.
And it's pretty much just like this one little rock that has a slightly jagged edge that looks like it was just in the middle of a landslide. And they scaled it up big to be like, oh, look, this is a pyramid. And it's like...
It just looks like a rock.
No, I don't think so.
Not the country, but...
Yeah. Important clarification, especially when we're talking about Mesopotamia, because Iraq would be part of Mesopotamia.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, I'm not seeing...
Oh, look at that one.
Yeah.
That one's shaped like a pentagon.
Yeah, but...
That's weird.
Yeah, I don't... I'd like to see some conclusive evidence. Like, they're trying to say stuff like that.
That one...
That's... These just look like a bunch of stretches to me.
Yeah.
It's like a bunch of just rubble on the ground they're trying to make be something. But I don't know. Maybe something else will come out that's new about it.
Maybe they're meaning it more symbolic. Like they saw it. And that's the thing about dreams too. If you think about, psychology, Freud with dream analysis. I'm not going to mention some of the things that he thought.
He's off the wall with some of his thoughts, but we won't get into all that.
I'm not going to mention specific items and what they were translated to because it's a bit out there and weird and gross. But he was so into dream analysis. And, there's so many different ways that you can interpret dreams. I personally don't believe in dream analysis. I don't. To Freud's level, I don't.
I think you can learn things about your subconscious through your dreams, but I think that there's just a lot more factors that play into dreams than anyone might realize.
Yeah. Now, in their dreams, they probably saw pyramids built physically, but it's a dream. So it could be more of a symbolic sense, a poetic sense. Because, I mean, think about the reason why they were made for Egypt and everything. It's like, you know, a burial place for... Or is it something else?
I don't think it's that. That's what I initially thought, and then I started going off the deep end, listening to Brothers of the Serpent, and very much changed my mind on that. I'm a huge proponent of...
What if it was a cover?
I'm a huge proponent of Christopher Dunn's Giza power plant theory. From what I've heard about that actually makes more sense to me than being burial grounds. I think that there's a lot that we're missing from our ancient past, but we'll get into that. I want to dive into the pyramids a bit when we do our Egyptian mythology discussion. So
yes.
Don't tune me out as being some kook. I feel like since I've kind of debunked Nibiru as being a foreign planet, 12th planet that the Anunnaki live on, I've kind of earned the right to be heard as like sort of a voice of reason sometimes, maybe. I don't know. Well, unless you got anything else, I think we'll close out the show here because this is probably one of the longest.
Yes.
This might be the longest. No, I think there was an hour 45 we did. So.
I don't know.
Anyway.
But I go back to just dream analysis. Listening to this, I don't think it's in a literal sense, especially because it is in a dream or astral projection. It's not like physically being there. It's spiritually being there.
Yeah.
And spiritual in and of itself can be symbolic. Like
it can. Yeah.
So I don't know.
There's a lot of factors that play into it.
Yeah. I don't think that this means it in a literal sense. They may have seen literal physical pyramids in their dreams, but I've seen physical literal stuff in my dreams. But did that happen? Mm-hmm. No.
Yeah. And I mean, like with one of my dreams I had, this isn't a political statement. This is a fact of what happened. I dreamt that Obama was going to win the election back in 2008, I think, before he actually won. And the way I saw that was with those maps that you see where you can see if a state's red or blue. And I saw like all the states like turn blue, even though I don't think like that actually happened in the election. I think that there were still some battleground states and a lot of red in there. Yeah. But like almost all of it turned blue. And I saw that, and that was how I saw that Obama was going to win the election before he actually did. Mm-hmm. And
I didn't know that you had that dream.
Yeah, but again, you have symbolism in there, and that's how I interpreted that symbolism. So it wasn't what literally happened necessarily, but it was the symbolic message of that and what I took from that message.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, with your dreams, the message is also exaggerated. So in your case, all of the states turn blue. Mm-hmm. That probably didn't happen in the actual election. I don't know the actual statistics on it, but that probably didn't happen. It's just that the message was exaggerated to make sure that you understood what the message was.
Right. I also think it's interesting. All this stuff gets brought out by the CIA after all this UFO stuff with the Commander Fravor, and then all these UFO hearings that we're having and everything else going on, all the drones flying around New Jersey. There's a lot of stuff going on where this stuff is just getting pushed out there in and amongst everything else. It does seem like it's... I'm
refraining from saying certain things. I won't
get political here, but it does seem like it could be some kind of misinformation campaign or something, or it could be a distraction from something else even, or to push an agenda or to set us up for something else that might come down the line. I don't know. There's a lot of different angles that you can put on this, a lot of different ways you can think about it, but... Mm-hmm. That being said, you can get a hold of us m.quad.musings@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok, m.quad.musings. Check out the YouTube channel, putting a lot more content out there. If you like what we talk about in a little bit more condensed form with some nice visuals to go along with it to help you conceptualize what we're talking about, it's going to be a great resource. YouTube is what's really building a lot of traction right now. We are exponentially growing on YouTube in comparison to what most small channels do at this point. So please give us a like, subscribe. That will definitely help boost us exponentially as well. If you're not already subscribing, every video you like helps push our content out to other viewers and stuff as well.
Email, interact with us. We love having friends. We love making friends.
Yeah.
And we love talking about cool topics.
I like a lot of the comments I'm getting on the YouTube shorts I'm creating.
Oh.
I've been getting some good insights from people. I get some trolls too, but
that's going to be expected.
Yeah, I get a lot of good insights from people. So if you're listening to this, definitely email in if you have any good thoughts to add, because we might read it on the show. I would like to do listener communication episodes at some point to interact with the listeners, but
that'd be very cool.
The listeners have to interact with us on a high level first to be able to do that.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Facebook, Musings and Mysteries, Mythical Matrix. Please share the podcast with a friend. If you know someone that might be interested, that's going to help us grow, gain more traction, gain more listeners, gain more followers. That's how we continue to produce content. The Buy Me a Cup of Coffee link is m.quad.musings. You buy us a book, literally in this case, help with the research costs. And that link will be in the show notes as well. Trying to think. I think I hit everything. I'm going to say I hit everything. So
I mean, we say all this in every other episode, so
yeah. Apparently Harry has missed it every single episode though until recently.
It's
missed
Harry.
it in 25, 30 episodes.
It's Harry.
Yeah, it's fair. love you, Harry. But yeah, that being said, please send us your confessions, concessions, snide remarks, whatever you like about the show, whatever you don't like about the show. Email us. Just don't email us your logical fallacies. That's a dangerous path there.
Yeah.
So whether you've been listening on the earth, above the earth, or below the earth,
in Sheol,
we thank you for quantumly transcending time on this new year, even though it might not be a new year for you listening to this now, as it's not for us right now as we record it. But yes, thank you for quantumly transcending time with us to discuss the Enuma Elish, Nibiru, and life on Mars. We'll see you next episode where we, hopefully, probably, will be continuing to break down Mesopotamian mythology.